Day of June 2015, the Ochelli Effect is live here on UCY.TV radio. Do appreciate you whether you decided to tune in and check us out on one of those applications on your fondle slab of choice or otherwise. If you come to the website at ucy.tv/TOE, I do appreciate you as well. And of course, if you're hearing this on YouTube or whatever else, thank you very much. Anyway, one day ago, I was having a piece of ice cream cake with the little boy because he's a year old. So Francis is 1 year old, Frankie. And, yeah, that was nice. Of course, he doesn't use a spoon or anything yet. He just kind of mashed it all over the place and all that kind of good stuff. But anyway, it's definitely enjoyable to raise this little boy and to watch him actually run long before my other children could even walk. It's an interesting time. It's an interesting time in history. I'm certainly not frightened by anything, but would like to see a lot of things turn around. So, of course, it is Tuesday night, and we're going to do kind of an odd split show tonight. Of course, every Tuesday we do a Liberty Beacon thing, and hopefully we're going to get to a couple of different updates on some stuff that we've covered on this show, and you can catch all at the Liberty Beacon. That is thelibertybeacon.com, all one word. Okay, and we're going to get some updates and all that, and plus go through some sort of article, which I didn't get a chance to completely read, but what else is new? Doesn't matter because it sounds totally different when it comes out of the mouth of this man, Roger Landry, who's with me tonight. How you doing, Roger?
Again, always doing great when I get to talk to you, Chuck.
Oh, he's getting bored with saying that now.
I got to tell you something. There are people out there I can get bored with in a heartbeat. You're not one of them.
Well, I do appreciate that. Thank you, sir. In the second hour, we'll have Jason Patrick from an organization called The Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps. So you can see how those two mindsets might go together. And I will be bringing on some other Liberty Beacon people for the second half of this show in further Tuesdays as we go. But this week, I figured we'll try and mix it up and just see what he has to say, because we're going to discuss some stuff about the BLM and stuff that was going on out west recently. Not ancient history, but recently. So, and I know that that kind of stuff catches your attention as well, Roger, but this is your hour, sir. So, and I do ask that question all the time. It's one of my little tricks, because I always want to make sure that the connection is established, and that's how I usually tell my guests to start talking, is I ask them how they're doing. So, and I know how you're doing. You're busy as hell because you got all this stuff going on. You got articles coming out of your ears. You got these 17 websites, is it now?
Actually, we have trimmed back a couple because we have some people who used to do radio shows, and when someone does a radio show for the Liberty Beacon Project, we usually set up a blog for them. So there's a little in, out. It's probably down to around 15 right now. It was up to 17 at one point. But we don't want to just spin our wheels on websites that aren't putting out good information. If they're not being used, if they're not putting information out, then we would rather just unpublish them. So the main sites, the ones that we utilize to put out a large footprint, a large word across the globe, they are all still there. And that includes the site in Australia, the site in South Africa, the site in the Middle East, the UK, Canada, at least a half a dozen very, very good U.S. websites. So, and if you ask me exactly how many and exactly what their names are, I'm not sure I could tell you. I'm not. But then we have people within this project who take care of those things, and I'm so glad. Because you got to understand, I'm 60 years old, and there's a lot of people out there probably thinking that, this guy's got to have the onset of Alzheimer's or dementia, or he's getting old, and it's a lot for me to handle. But I would dare anybody out there to trade one of my days for one of yours, and I don't care how busy you are. Mm-hmm. Because I am literally frying every brain cell in my head for 18 to 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And Chuck, other than being sick, I cannot remember a day I intentionally took off to do nothing. And I'm not even sure I know how to do nothing anymore.
Oh, that's true. And even when your computer blew up on you, you were still busy. You were utilizing the phone.
I was on the phone.
and you were climbing the walls for what little time you couldn't get to it. And even then, you were borrowing computers and everything else. I mean, it was just crazy. I mean, I know that's kind of behind-the-scenes stuff, but
knock on wood, that doesn't happen again real soon.
Oh, yeah, we don't want to see that.
I have a backup laptop now.
Ah, well, and
so
probably because of that experience.
Yes, if my computer dies, I can whoop that sucker out and be back up and running in the amount of time it takes it to fire up and be to plug the network cable into it. Done.
Right. So, anyway, it is absolutely amazing. You're basically my father's age. Okay. And
yes, I'm 60.
Yeah, so my father would be 60 at this point, but I can't keep up with you. I cannot do as much stuff as you're doing. I mean, I do a bunch of broadcasts every week. I do some research every week. I definitely do all that. I've got a couple other projects that are cooking, but I mean, I can't handle all this stuff you do. I mean,
well, you know what? I'm going to disagree with you, and this is probably one of the few times I will. And I'm going to tell you exactly why I think you're wrong. All right. Anything that you have had to do in the time that I've known you, you've managed to get done, okay? It is a matter of adapting. And if your workload suddenly hit the point mine was at, other than the fact that you have a family, and happy birthday to Frankie, if you had to, you could. All right? The point here is I am so tickled pink that you have this beautiful young son, that you can enjoy this portion of his life, and you can watch him grow up, and you can play with him, and you can interact with him, that to want to put you at the level of stress or the level of interaction that I have to have every day, because this is all there is in my life. Okay, this is where I wish to be, what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I don't have a young child. I don't have a wife. I don't have all of these things I've experienced in the past, and I feel that I'm a better person for having done so. But I don't have those in my life. But I know you well enough to know that if push came to shove, you could do just about anything, Chuck.
Well, I definitely appreciate your confidence, but I'm telling you, I don't think I could juggle. I mean, my own estimate, I haven't had to, that's true. I haven't had to, and I haven't pulled myself completely away from, the family situation, or if I didn't have him, or running around the house and I wasn't trying to take care of things on the homestead, it would be a different situation. I'm sure there'd be a lot.
Yeah.
I'd be the guy who works in the middle of the night all the time. You're all day long, but you do actually take some rest now and then. You have to.
About 4 hours a night, and it's usually from about 4 o'clock in the morning till about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, see, that would be like my frantically getting things accomplished time, probably, because I'm very good. Once the sun goes down, I feel a lot better. I'm one of those guys.
Do you sharpen your teeth with a razor? With a file, I mean? Uh-huh. Okay.
It used to be said, and I do have fairly prominent fangs still left in my head. I was, and those just kind of came out. Look, that's a weird story. They're not cosmetically created or anything. That's literally what grew in when the baby teeth fell out. I mean, fairly prominent canines. But no, I don't like, drink blood. And
let's see you howl, Chuck.
See, I could do that, but, I probably turned enough listeners away already. So let's not blow up their speakers, too. Although you might, depending.
Oh, I howl all the time.
That's true, just a little bit.
We call it ranting, yeah.
And I was just going to say, that's why, you're the main ranter-in-chief at the Liberty Beacon. Not only the founder and the most prolific publisher, I think, on the site, but
I'm about to hit 3,000 articles on the Liberty Beacon alone, not counting the other sites that I've contributed to over the years. But I believe I'm at about 2,800 and something articles published on the Liberty Beacon.
So before we get into the meat of the article, I did say last week that we were going to talk about, just give a brief update on the walk around the kingdom situation, because he had just passed a milestone this week, right?
Actually, he hasn't stopped walking, but he's taking a week where he's not taxing himself as much. His way of recouping is, instead of walking 20, 22 miles a day, he'll take a week where he'll walk maybe 10 to 12 miles a day. So he's sitting at about 900 miles right now. We're going to be doing a special this coming Monday on his 1,000 mile milestone. And we usually do a weekly half-hour show on Update on Walking the Kingdom. But that'll be an hour-long special, which will include a lot of information on drug education, which is why Stephen Cook is doing that walk. And for anybody who doesn't know, Stephen Cook is the senior admin of the TLB United Kingdom website, Go Forward Together. So this coming Monday, we will be airing a 1-hour special on his 1,000-mile milestone, as well as a bunch of information from Peter Dwan, who is his inspiration for doing this 4,000-mile walk. And Peter Dwan is a drug educator in the UK, and he is phenomenal. And these are the two guests I have every week on Walking the Kingdom. So Monday there will be a special. Right now he's just past the 900-mile mark, so by next Monday he will have crossed the 1,000-mile mark easily, and we will step up to tell everybody, if you think that this was a stunt, if you think this was just a publicity thing, if you think this man wasn't serious, try walking 1,000 miles in his shoes. This man is 63 years old.
Yeah, see, there you go.
Not an athlete.
Another guy I probably can't keep up with. But okay. In addition to, I did want to ask you about the project that we talked about a way back, and we didn't really get into too many details, but with Dr. Lewis, how's that going?
Dr. Lewis is in the middle of finishing up 2 other projects. As soon as that is done, we're going to raise the level on the project that he is working on. I really can't discuss it very much, because if I do, what I'm told is I will corrupt the peer review process.
Well, I just wanted an update because we vaguely
he's doing
alluded
right.
to it.
He's doing a national study for us, but that needs to be pretty much low-keyed until all the data is collected and submitted to a peer-reviewed journal such as Scientific America or Lancet or one of the other peer-reviewed journals. But that is still underway. That is still progressing. But that's a project we knew was going to take anywhere from 12 to 16 months to accomplish.
Well, right. I'm, again, not being impatient, just checking in on stuff that I know we've mentioned briefly or talked about on earlier shows before we get into this article.
He's doing some other projects with us as well, and he's done some radio shows with me, and we'll be doing a radio show over the next 2 weeks where we are discussing a product that is well within the radar scope of the Liberty Project. We're one of their contributors and supporters, and these are two gentlemen who have invented a testing kit to allow parents to test their children for mercury poisoning, for aluminum poisoning after vaccinations, for heavy metal or toxic poisoning after massive, aerial spraying in their areas, for toxicity of their water, toxicity of their food or their environment, without even having to go to a doctor, without having to let blood, no blood test required, merely a swab test. And we will go into that a little bit more. I'm about to publish a TLB radio special on that topic with both of these gentlemen. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a test kit that parents can buy, test their children for toxicity of just about anything you think of. And what really strikes me about this is that a blood test can be as accurate as only 50% to 80% on specific toxins or heavy metals. The test that these gentlemen have developed and invented and patented is 99.19% accurate on all toxins they can test for, which is a wide variety, including precancerous cells, including hormones, including every toxic metal you can think of, including every biotoxin you can think of. A parent can buy this kit, test their children, send it in for analysis. It is a fraction of the cost of going in and having a blood test done. You don't have to pin your children down while a doctor sticks a needle into them and extracts blood. There's no pain, no strain, a fraction of the cost, and no doctor required. This is innovative. This is a paradigm shift for parents out there who are in fear of the toxins we are all being presented with and exposed to on a regular basis. And Chuck, you and I have done many shows on the multiple toxins we're being bombarded with on a daily basis simultaneously. Here is a way for parents to check not only themselves, but to test their children for their level of toxicity, and then go to a project or a program that a naturopath program that will allow them to remove the toxins that have been identified within the bodies of themselves or their children. Here is a paradigm shift, and yes, the Liberty Beacon Project has been talking to these people for a year. We have exclusive information to splash out across the internet, and that will be done within the next 24 to 48 hours. We will publish this information in this show.
And I'm sure when you do that, you'll also address stuff like exposure levels, like not only detoxing from these things, but also probably, a sort of tip list that'll give people an idea of how to look out for exposure, how to reduce particular exposure. Yeah.
The first show is, how do you find out your children are toxic? Okay? The second show is, how do you avoid the toxins, or how do you chelate these toxins from your body, and what is an acceptable level and what is not an acceptable level. But some of these toxins we're going to talk about, there's no acceptable level. If you're talking about fluoride, if you're talking about aluminum, if you're talking about mercury, arsenic, lead, it doesn't matter how small the initial exposure is if you are exposed to those over an extended period of time. This is cumulative.
Right.
And as a cumulative toxin, it is continuously eroding your body's ability to be healthy. So, yes, that is show number 2, and that will follow up show number 1 in probably 10 days to 2 weeks.
Right. So everybody definitely check that out and look for it to come out in the next 24 to 48 hours, because this is important information. And information
this is
everybody
groundbreaking information.
Yes. Plus to be able to have the convenience of something that allows you, to very easily sort of discern what your position is, what your status is. That's awfully amazing as well.
Without a doctor.
What's that?
Without a doctor.
Without a doctor, yes. Without going and having to put down your money or involve yourself in some sort of a system or a program or something that might wind up costing you a lot more down the road. Without doing all of that and giving into big pharma and giving into the medical industrial complex, without having to do all of that, yes, do it at home, figure it out at home, come up with solutions at home for yourself.
Empower the parents.
Through education and access to good resources. And that's exactly what that is. So I wanted to touch upon that too. Great. Perfect. See, and we didn't even discuss what we were going to do tonight, but I wanted to make sure we got to those subjects, and I knew very well if I threw them at you, we would get the right information. So everybody look out for that in the next 24 to 48 hours. Now, moving forward, though, because we do have an article today.
Yes. It's one of my latest articles, actually.
Interesting title. Yes, it is a recently published article. From the 27th of June, looks like. And it is called We the People's Conscience. And then there are ellipsis points, which I am rather fond of, on life support. So, of course, ellipsis points always indicate that you can continue on with the idea or the sentence if you want to, but the pertinent information has been displayed for you. Those are those 3 periods, 3 dots, whatever, in case, some of my less understanding individuals out there might not know what an ellipsis point is. There you go. We the People's Conscience on life support.
Yes.
All right. So go ahead, Roger. I'm going to shut up because I think when we both have the mic open, it's chewing up bandwidth or something weird here. But I will definitely shut up now for a bit, and there you go.
All right. As Chuck so eloquently put, the title of the article, We the People's Conscience on Life Support. Many will not wish to hear what I'm about to put forth. Yes, the truth does hurt, especially when the facts are as blatant or as brutal as they truly are. If America continues on this path, the inevitability must be a world rising up to contain and possibly destroy a brutal and tyrannical nation, as was the case in our last 2 world wars. So how did we get here? Before we can accomplish the task, you must first strategize, choreograph, and make contingencies for undesirable scenarios. Then take action in a controlled and progressive fashion to build the required goals. The usurpation of America from within is no exception. Actually, it could quite possibly be the rule. The American people throughout our history have resisted change, conflict, and outright war. It took direct acts of aggression from perceived enemies against we the people to facilitate enough backing for our leaders to justify entering into the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, the invasion of Afghanistan, etc. Remember the words of Admiral Yamamoto after the attack on Pearl Harbor, proclaiming, "I fear we have awakened a sleeping giant." Emphasis on the word awakened. But is this reality or incidents, false flag operations, contrived and perpetrated by a few all-powerful elites who own this government and in fact rule America and a vast majority of this planet to bend the will of the American people and utilize the most powerful military force this planet has ever known to achieve their personal goals? Look around you today and see the ultimate control mechanism of fear being smothered over the American population once again to extract compliance and support for even more imperialistic warmongering across the globe. As is the case in a lot of my articles, I inserted a meme here. And this is Zbigniew Brzezinski, advisor to Barack Hussein Obama, in an address to the Council on Foreign Relations. It used to be so much easier to control 1 million people than to kill them. But today it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control them. And the article continues. We are all learned of the ultimate evil of tyrannical leaders and governments such as Pol Pot's Cambodia, Stalin's USSR, Hitler's Nazi Germany, Mao's China, and so many more, who through the exercise of tyranny and totalitarianism sought to impose their will over the lives of unsuspecting masses, resulting in the slaughter of untold millions of innocent people. Yet this country enforces its will or wishes on countless nations, the most powerful war machine this planet has ever seen, through military or economic blackmail, or both. Please explain to me how this government is so different or innocent of the same mechanisms of tyranny. Today, we the people, who once resisted any type of conflict, are now mentally repressed under a monolithic government responsible for having killed, directly or indirectly, at least 3 million, with some estimates approaching 4 million people, and destroying the lives of untold millions more. The vast majority, by our government's own accounting, over 95%, of this carnage consists of innocent human beings never having been a threat to America or collateral damage. God, how I hate that phrase. But for me, the worst consideration is to try to understand how most of this planet sees America. Pause for a second. I want to qualify that. I spent 30 years of my life out of this country, 80% of every single year, traveling the globe, doing it for the military-industrial complex, working DOD contracts. I know what the world thinks. I've seen how the world looks at America, and it has changed, my friends. So let me continue. How the world or the planet sees America today. How they see us as bullies, as tyrants, and as liars, caught with our hands in the cookie jar once too often. We are hated, feared, and the butt of many nasty local jokes. A far cry from the Camelot or the beacon of freedom for the world as we used to represent. But far too many Americans are oblivious to this, and they sleep on. The fact is, so many Americans are totally disconnected and have little to no clue as to what is being perpetrated in their names across this planet. Blissful ignorance is an American staple of mind. Today, the United States has either covert or overt forces in 170 of 194 nations on this planet. At this point, I inserted a video, and I strongly suggest that you go and read this article, look at the video, where a Brit walked the streets of America asking them questions of things that were going on across the planet that we should all know about. The ignorance level, not the stupidity, the ignorance level or the lack of knowledge level will frickin' amaze you. The crimes against humanity being conducted on a daily basis with the knowledge and outright support of our leaders under the direction of their masters, the elites, is driving a growing hatred of America and everything it stands for. At this point, I inserted another video. This is the video of us propaganda of the U.S. government propagandizing the American people for the need to attack Iraq because of weapons of mass destruction. The video points out and proves what a massive lie this was. The rest of the world knew it was a lie. The American people, a vast majority of them, swallowed it, hook, line, and sinker. The part of this that borders on insanity, or just plain ridiculous, is this is emanating from a country that professes to value personal freedom, national sovereignty, and self-determination. Really? Just how the hell does that work? Where is the conscience and moral fortitude of we the people? Because in America, if you fire the boss for his ineptitude, well, look in the mirror. Like it or not, by the very document that this once great nation was founded upon and built upon, we are the boss. Do you honestly believe the forces that will inevitably rise up to punish America for her greedy and brutal global transgressions will see we the people as innocent? If you think yes, then your head is buried so far up your butt that we will have to pump sunshine to you. You see, as the world sees it, we as the people, don't push back, fact, against this imperialistic march across the world only to suit an elitist agenda, but at our cost in burden and freedoms. We, by our disconnect, which a massive amount of Americans are, with the actions of our government, allow this to happen. So on some level, the world believes we must be complicit.
Now, Roger, wait a second. And I'm going to stop you. Do me a favor and just mute for a second. More than one reason why I'm asking you to do this. Okay? But mute for a second, and I'm going to throw something in here. I talk to people from all over the planet, okay? There is more than one perception out there. In some ways, to be honest with you, you are underselling this, okay? There are certain instances of international policy that the alleged American government participates in, which are not simply seen as out of control because we didn't seize control, but literally the belief that the type of evil that it requires to visit the type of horrors upon certain people on this planet. And I'm not going to get into naming everybody or talking about what's being done, and I'm not necessarily saying it's always weapons of war. There are financial things that go on. There are different aid institutions which are not allowed to help people. Everything, there is a wide spectrum of stuff that causes people around the world to wonder what in the hell is wrong with the American people that they are allowing this. Okay? So on one hand, you're underselling this. Okay? I want you to know that. Because it's seen as even worse.
The article.
Oh, I know. But even when people say, well, that's not really true, you know, the rest of the world doesn't see it this way, I'm telling you that on a personal level, there are people that are involved in investing in America from outside of this country who are shocked and dismayed at the behavior of our government and at the behavior of the people. There are others on this planet who don't understand, just like we don't here, that we're supposed to be the bosses. Okay? There are others. And I'm telling you that it's just a mess of stuff. And it's not just based on where we were involved militarily. That's not the only thing, although there's hardly any place on the planet, and we've said it several times and pointed it out several different ways, that there's hardly a space on the globe anywhere that the United States military is not in some way present. Okay? But that's not the only thing. Remember that. Listeners, please, I'm telling you, I'm begging you to understand this. Now I'm going to shut up again, and I'm going to mute up, and you go ahead, Roger, but I wanted to make sure that I stamped on that point really quickly. And also there was a little weird kind of thing in your transmission. I wanted to give it time to clear up. So there we go.
Well, I thank you, Chuck, and what you said is exactly right. And you must also understand that I've also stated that we are perpetrating evils across the planet either via our massive military or economic threats. So it is a double-edged sword. It is both military and economic. And yes, this is a fact. But let me continue, and maybe I can delve into that just a little bit further, okay?
Sure.
The involvement of Americans today is nowhere near the engagement we experienced as a society during the Vietnam era or even to some extent the Bush era. We don't fire our leaders who allow or ignore it. We don't impeach those who through the wishes of their true global masters would advance it in a perpetual cycle and illegally. Hell, in most cases, we don't even discuss it. Okay? Has the voice of the people been neutered? The American conscience, the past guide to actions we condoned by our government as a people, is on life support. And again, here's a meme. And the meme states, future scholars will look back at this point in American history and say, we the people spoke in a unified voice to push back on the encroaching tide of tyranny, or this was America's darkest hour. It's time to make history. And the article continues. 50 years from now, when the children of our children study the history of this once great and admired country, will we be the USSR, Red China, or Nazi Germany of our time? You may push back and say, this is not so, and I will say, wake the hell up. By our founding documents, we the people are sovereign and bear the task of policing and maintaining the safety, health, and vitality and the ability of this great country to continue. And we have ceded that responsibility for far too long. Those who would put blame must first recognize their own. We hold as much blame on what is being perpetrated across this nation as our government does for our very failure to step up and say, what the hell are you doing? And that, my friends, is a fact. If you don't agree with me, then you don't agree with a republic. You don't agree with the Constitution. You don't agree with self-determination. You don't agree with anything, including the Bill of Rights. If you can't understand that one of the reasons why this country is perpetrating evil across the world in our name is because we have failed to stop it, then you're an idiot. I continue. We the people have proven to be the weak link in the chain of politics and power in America. A majority of this failing by us has been accomplished by two mechanisms. The elitist propaganda behemoths, the mainstream media, and as a result, us, via apathy, complacency, and complicity. The last part of this video, of this article, is another video. A factual, blatant, and spot-on video. Watch it. And if you come away after watching this video with the same imperialistic viewpoint that everything we're doing is correct, that we need to be doing what we're doing, and contend on allowing a few greedy elite with their global agenda to write the future history of America, we who are awake and truly aware will know for sure where and with whom you stand. And let me finish this off with this, okay? My last meme. Many Americans fought and too many died in World War II to defeat an evil called fascism. The world rose up against fascism. Benito Mussolini described fascism as fascism should more properly be called corporatism because it is the merger of state and corporate power. Look around you at who truly controls this once proud republic and its leaders. How the hell did we become what we hated most? Stop and consider what Chuck said. Stop and consider what you just heard from me. Because if we continue, everybody in the liberty movement, everybody who is awake and aware, is reading more every day about the BRICS nations forming a pact against America and her allies. What happened just before World War II? Every day we're hearing more and more of the war drums being beaten. Every day more of the world rises up against a tyrannical America. Tell me how this is any different than what we did against Nazi Germany. If we continue down this path, the inevitability is the world will rise up against America. Do you sanction that? Do you believe in this? It will happen unless we, the people, wake the hell up and change it. It's happening as we speak. And I'm done, Chuck.
Absolutely, and spot on, exactly the points that I try to make all the time, but of course, I love the way that you put them. Let me add, though, a couple other things.
Please.
Okay, let's talk about the recent weeks as I study various news feeds, and I am taking reports from individuals, okay? And this is where a terrible feeling begins to rise up in my gut somewhere, all right? We are watching right now while people are talking about, exactly what the validity of Vladimir Putin is and everything else. What is very quietly happening is that there are U.S. military assets in very, very highly tenuous situations with Chinese military assets. There is a confrontational attitude regarding the Russian Federation and us. The European Union is in trouble and is being pushed at this point. What we are looking at take a look back at what they called World War I and take a look back at what they called World War II. Okay? The big difference for us as Americans is going to be this. When World War III is declared, notice I don't say if. Notice I say when World War III is declared, okay? And this, of course, is my opinion. Roger can shoot it all full of holes all he wants. Here is going to be the major difference. And I want you to understand that this is a major difference. We were kind of brought into World War I after a financial crisis. We were kind of brought into World War II after a financial crisis and after maneuvering where there were sanctions brought against different nations, including restricting fuel to the Japanese and all of that. Yes, this is all a matter of the historical record. But this time, World War III, when it's declared, we are not going to be called upon to come into the conflict. We are practically the ones creating it. Okay.
Well, it goes even deeper than that, and I'm so glad you brought that point up. I really am. It will be nations rising up against the actions of the elitists who control America today.
Oh,
this is what's going to happen. We will be Nazi Germany. We will be Japan. We will be the nation that hostilities are focused against. But it's going to be one more thing that you didn't mention, Chuck, and that is what everybody needs to understand. In World War I, we lost a lot of American lives. In World War II, we lost a lot of American lives. But nary a shell, a bomb, or a bullet was fired within the continental United States of America. If you don't understand that World War III is going to change the paradigm, there will be destruction in America, on American soil. We're talking about weapons of war today that make it absolutely certain that American cities will be devastated, that millions of American lives will be lost, that your brothers, your sisters, your uncles, your children are going to be killed, slaughtered by weapons of mass destruction. World War III will be something the United States has never experienced in global warfare. It will be brought home. You will see it in all of its horror. You will see it in all of its blood. You will see it in everything that tears a nation to its knees. That's the big difference. When World War III happens, it's not going to be in someone else's backyard. Don't count on it. Don't plan on it. It will be in your backyard. Guaranteed.
And this is the certainty that we are facing if we don't
allow it to happen.
Right. There's the opposite way of way I was going to put it, but you're right. Exactly right. If we allow this to continue, if we allow this trajectory to come to fruition, okay, this is precisely what will happen. And I'm not somebody who's a fearmonger. I'm not somebody who tells you that these things are coming and be ready, and I'm not this guy. But here's the thing. Reality's reality, okay? If we are engaged, all right, in a geo-military engagement, okay, extended throughout the planet on so many different fronts, there is no reason in the world that the technology would not allow this to reach American cities. It may only be the West Coast. It may only be the East Coast. It may only be a particular section of the country. But it will come. If we are engaged in full-scale warfare and we reach in our lifetime World War III, if that is allowed to happen, I can't disagree with you. I want to disagree with you, but I can't.
Well, you must also consider that at this point in time, just about every major military power on the planet is conducting continuous, in one form or another, via one mechanism of their military, whether it's air power, land power, sea-based power. Just about every single major military power on this planet is conducting some form of continuous military exercises. Mm-hmm. Again, you must see this as preparations for war. You see Putin moving missile batteries and forces up to NATO borders. You see NATO moving military and air power up to the Russian Federation borders. You see the United States, again, just announcing that they're going to send fighting vehicles and tanks to reinforce NATO powers. Mm-hmm.
That's why assets are being shuffled all throughout
all of this
Europe.
Is happening. You hear rumors of conflicts that have already taken place in the Arctic. Okay, there are some people who would say, and I've got no way to verify this, so I'm not going to tell you it's a fact, that there's already been air battles over the Arctic between the Russian Federation and the U.S. and her allies. We are seeing this happening more and more on a daily basis. All it takes is the one accident at the wrong time to trip World War III. And I don't so much agree with you, Chuck, although I agree with you in general with what you said. I don't so much agree it's only going to be the East Coast or it's only going to be the West Coast. I spent years on and working on nuclear fleet ballistic missile carrying submarines. The Russians and the Chinese, especially the Russians, have some of the most advanced nuclear submarines on the planet. These have the capability of launching missiles thousands upon thousands of miles. If you don't think Chicago can't get hit from a submarine that's sitting in the middle of the Atlantic or the middle of the Pacific Ocean, then you're wrong. There is no place in this country that is safe from modern technological warfare. Nothing. We're not even talking about the weapons that are orbiting this planet. We're not talking about particle beams. We're not talking about microwaves.
No, we're talking about the publicly known stuff, not even the stuff that emerged. Yeah.
EMP bombs being detonated in a low orbit over the geosynchronous orbit over the United States and wiping out our power grid, which would throw us into the Stone Age in a matter of a week. We're not talking about any of these things. Anybody who doesn't believe in total that if and when World War III kicks off, the United States isn't going to become the battlefield, and we're not going to see utter devastation of our infrastructure, you're an idiot! And I feel sorry for you, because you're not going to work along with Chuck and me and tens of thousands of other people, but not enough, who are trying to stop this lunacy before our children die.
Well, that's it. And as we speak, I have more than one corroborating witness explaining to me that electromagnetic weapons are actually being tested
Yes.
up by Alaska.
I could have gone gone through all of this. I could have told there's more. There are half a dozen different types of weapon platforms in orbit around this country, and they're not just American.
Oh, yeah, I'm talking about stuff that we can see on the planet. I don't even begin to claim to understand what we have in orbit, okay?
They have technology today to cause massive earthquakes across the planet. And yes, things like HARP. Oh, gee, did I really say that? You know, they were supposed to close HARP down in 2014. Remember when they told everybody they were going to close HARP down in 2014? It didn't happen. Not only that, but there are HARP arrays in in China, HARP arrays in all over Russia, more than one HARP array in the United States. You don't have to, you shut the one down in Alaska. That don't mean all the bad stuff goes away. That crap is spread all across the planet. They have the ability to cause tornadoes, to cause hurricanes, to cause the shifting in tectonic plates, massive earthquakes. If you think I'm kidding you, I don't say anything I can't prove, and I dare you to prove me wrong.
That's right. And meanwhile, those exercises that you were talking about that are so extremely dangerous, because the fact is, all you need is for something to go wrong during these exercises. You have overlapping, and it's already been reported rather quietly in a couple of places that there have been little slips.
Yes.
But, you know, if it gets bigger, you know, so far we've had, you know, like, say, American Air assets, let's be nice and general about this, escorted out of areas they weren't supposed to be in.
And Russian assets.
And Russian assets being escorted out of areas.
Ukraine right now is a ticking time bomb. Because it is the focal point of the might of two imperiums, the Russian Federation and the U.S. and its NATO allies.
Via NATO.
That is the focal point that could very easily spark World War III. Crimea, the Ukraine, all throughout that area right now, we are seeing the flexing of massive military muscle. All it takes is one boo-boo, one oops.
And historically, that's why it's so fascinating to look at historically what happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis, because even at that time, military assets were mobilized throughout the planet based on what was happening.
Yes.
On this little island, okay?
Yes.
So, you know.
That had to do a lot more with Cuba. That had to do with the original missiles we had put into the Middle East and countries bordering the Soviet Union when it was actually the Soviet Union before a lot of breakaway nations split away, some of which are now part of NATO. But we had missiles pointed right at the Soviet Union, not too far off of their borders. Mm-hmm. So what was Russia doing? They were saying, wait a minute, you can have missiles sitting right next to the Soviet Union, but we can't put missiles in Cuba, okay? This is where a lot of the hypocrisy started.
Well, and I'll tell you something else, is that, again, residual from World War II, and what was going on globally, to examine it properly, you got to understand, we actually didn't really almost come to blows so much in Cuba, although there's a lot of interesting information about how close we came to unleashing a thermonuclear war just over that island nation.
Believe it or not, Khrushchev, for all the evil they make this man out to be, Khrushchev saved the world.
Mm-hmm. With a back-channel communication to President Kennedy at the time.
Yep.
Otherwise, you know, the map would not look as it does, okay? No. But we almost came to blows. Ready for this one? Everybody thinks I'm crazy when I say this, but I'm telling you, look it up. We almost came to blows in East and West Germany.
Yes, many times.
But during the Cuban Missile Crisis, all that stuff was ratcheted up. We had tanks pointed at each other, ready to roll.
Right across the border from each other, yep.
They were shadowing each other.
Eyeball to eyeball.
You got it. They were shadowing each other over that little divide. All it would have taken is for one miscommunication with one, and there were a couple, but all it would have taken is one where shots were fired and it instigated an engagement. That would have been it.
it would have escalated out of control almost instantaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we're looking at today. For everybody, and let me wrap this up real quick.
Sure.
For everybody who thinks that everything America does is great. Everything America does is bringing democracy to the world. Everything that America does is for the good of the planet. You are the people we are trying to reach. You are the ones who are propagandized beyond belief. All you have to do is look. Open your eyes and see the way the world is looking, and the vast majority of the world, and more every day, is looking at America. And understand this. When World War III starts, they're not just going after our military. They're coming after America. They're going to be there saying to us, you had a chance to stop this. You as a nation of people with self-determination, a nation of people who claim to live within a constitutional republic, had a chance to stop this, and you didn't. You are complicit. And you know something? This is what hurts the most. They will be right.
Absolutely correct, sir. Absolutely correct. But there is a chance to turn this around, and there are various ways to push back against all of this. And, of course, that is the main goal with the Liberty Beacon as a whole.
The eradication of programmed ignorance.
And to also push back against any form of tyranny.
Anything that harms humanity, yes.
Yes, anything that is tyrannical against humanity, and that is, again, the main point at thelibertybeacon.com. And, of course, you are the founder and the main ranter and my friend.
That feeling is very mutual, John.
And I do appreciate your time. I know you have to go, but, you know, it's
I've got 4 minutes, so...
It's still a sickening feeling. Because as
do you think I enjoyed doing this show? I've got to tell you something. Of all the shows I've done with you, this is the one I detested most. I didn't want to do this. I didn't like doing this. I didn't like writing this article. I don't like telling my fellow Americans that when World War III rains down upon America, it will be something we could have prevented and didn't. We will get our comeuppance. Okay? This I detested. This is the worst show I will ever do with you. But the fact is, it's necessary. The fact is, it's a fact.
The only thing that comes to mind that was any semblance of this kind of like sick feeling in the bottom of my stomach is when we really sat and dissected nuclear proliferation. That's the only thing. But the thing that makes this particular presentation edge it out is that, guess what? That walks hand in hand with what we're talking about. You know, no matter what begins conventionally, the option is there. And
that will happen. But it all goes back to the title of the article, and I want anybody to tell me now that we've had this discussion, you've heard the article, that the title isn't spot on. It isn't so apropos. We the people's conscience on life support.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. That is extremely poignant and extremely just, as you said, apropos for exactly what the subject matter is, and this is what we are confronted with. Unfortunately, it is where we are. And it is, just like you said, they will be justified when they blame the American people themselves for this, because we have not spoken up. We have not done what is necessary. We have not fired the people that need to be fired. We have not handled this. So,
well, you know, I have heard I've talked to so many people from overseas that say, do you agree with what your government's doing? And almost to the individual, okay? Very few exceptions, but there are some. People have said, no, we don't agree. And then the very next comment from these individuals from Scotland or Ireland or somewhere in the Middle East or from Australia or from Germany, the very next comment is, then why are you letting it happen?
Mm-hmm.
So there There is, since we were the beacon on the hill for so many years, the Camelot, there is a knowledge across the planet that we, the people, are supposed to be the sovereigns in this country. We are supposed to sit at the top of the totem pole. So they have no reservations about blaming us.
And unfortunately, as we both have said in a couple of different ways, they are absolutely correct to do so.
Yes.
And what else can you say?
Nothing. I'm out of time.
There you go. So again, Roger Landry at the Liberty Beacon. I do advise you to go check out the article we've discussed tonight, as well as everything else. The other about 3,000 articles that Roger has done over the past couple of years, they are all...
well, I haven't written them all. I put that many up, but I've probably written close to 1,000 of them.
Well, either way, they are all extremely important. You don't put out information as filler or fodder. You don't put out even opinion pieces without a mission in mind. And of course, the eradication of programmed ignorance is that mission. Of course, check out the mission statement over there too, because it has been unchanged to the best of my knowledge since its inception.
Yep.
And it absolutely points to the purpose for every single thing you see on the Liberty Beacon, all one word, thelibertybeacon.com. So, thank you once again, sir. I do appreciate your time and trying to catch up with my second hour guest, but I know you've got other things to do, so I can't say anything else except thank you.
Well, you are very appreciated, Chuck. Anytime we have a chance to eradicate a little bit of that programmed ignorance, I always feel a little bit better at the end of the show.
Right. So, unfortunately, an ugly subject, but needing to be handled just like many other things in this world. But this one, highly dangerous. So, keep it in mind.
All right. Have a good day. I'm out of here.
All right. Take care, Ryan.
Bye.
Bye. So, and again, I don't enjoy, don't appreciate, don't, take great glee in having to discuss this stuff. Not at all. Not in the least. But, the fact is it needs to be handled, and we are not handling our responsibility here. There are various ways to go after this. I mean, look, I understand that the greater selections for the executive posts in this country are, for the most part, a ridiculous exercise. I understand this, but every single way that we can slow down the machinery of all this stuff, this is what the bottom line is. This is what we got to do. Every single way. This is what we should have been doing for the past few decades that I can count, and of course longer than that. And another point about discussing, putting context to the greater world conflicts, right? Talking about World War II, talking about World War I, all right? I didn't point out that there were elites which initiated the need for our entry, the United States military entry into those larger global conflicts. I didn't emphasize that part because that's the same as it is now. The difference is, according to the historians later on, we were kind of invited into those greater conflicts in one way or another. This is a difference this time, though, because I don't see how. I mean, look, they can rewrite history 80 different ways, and I'm all for revisionist history and trying to get things correct and actually straightening out the crap that they have propagandized us with from day one. Absolutely. Absolutely. The illusion, okay, I can't even comprehend how they could sell an illusion ever after that the United States was not the instigator if this greater world conflict really does completely come to fruition. We have instigated it on a global scale. This isn't a matter of challenging a couple of empires. This isn't a matter of challenging a couple of greater industrial, coalitions. This isn't a matter of playing both sides and then getting caught and all this kind of thing, like many of our politicians have done, like this nation has done, like the bankers always do, like. It's not just that. It will be seen as, and it will be rightly seen as, a historical reality that we not only participated in World War III, we instigated it. And on top of that, there is no reason in the world that the United States would enjoy its lack of molestation that it has enjoyed up to this point in history regarding the homeland. Okay? Disgusting as that term is, I am talking about the continental United States and our territories and etc. We will actually be extremely vulnerable, ripe for the picking, okay, by anybody who wishes to exact any sort of revenge, make its political points, make maneuvers which will cause the people of this country to lose their way regarding supporting these things, etc., right? This is part of the reality. Mr. Patrick, is that you?
Yes, sir.
Ah, okay. You know you're on the air. Do you know you're on the air, sir?
Hello?
Hello. Not hearing me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you're on the air, by the way.
Okay, great.
We were talking about global politics up to this point, but we're going to touch upon a few more continental issues with you, I guess, right? And of course, I have Jason Patrick on, who is from the Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps. Okay. You want to give people an explanation of what the Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps is?
Well, I live in America, and it was based on being a free country and freedom, and that's nearly all but gone. And you hear people talking all the time about how they fight for your freedom, and I just can't figure out how we continue to lose it. So, the Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps was birthed out of, a couple of things. Ron Paul's campaign talked about being the media, and it's something that I embraced. And then, I don't know if you're familiar with the Bundy Ranch, but I drove from Georgia all the way across the country to stand up there, and just spent a long bunch of hours in the car, was not getting a lot of sleep, and so we just birthed the Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps out of that. Just a network of people that continually, I guess, bang their head against the powers that be and demand freedom.
Right. Plus, I've seen you do online presentations where you really break down to the most, the most simple, lowest common denominator, trying to explain to people what the concept of refusal is, what the concept of non-participation is, all these kinds of things. And, that's something that not everybody's doing, is explaining to them on a very real day-to-day basis what it means to refuse to participate in a lot of different things that they disagree with. Yeah, I love when you do that, by the way, and I've really not gotten a chance to talk to you about that kind of stuff anywhere. But it is amazing, though, isn't it? And the BLM was involved in the Bundy Ranch thing, and of course, everybody remembers that whole deal with the cattle and Cliven Bundy and his family out there. But there's been recent developments with the BLM as well that are in a whole other state that you know a little something about. I wonder if you wouldn't want to talk to people about that a little bit.
Oh yeah, in Oregon, there was a guy. There's an Oregon mining district, and the BLM has a pretty strong reputation there of just coming in and taking over people's places, burning down cabins, and just stealing equipment, moving it off of claims and property. So they basically issued the BLM without any really word or anything, gave one of the miners there a cease and desist order and gave him like a deadline that and said that one of the things said that they would come burn his stuff. Well, there was no due process or anything like that, and the deadline was, about less than a month away. So he basically needed some help, and so we went and stood there, and if the BLM thinks that they can just arbitrarily lay down dates and things like that and come do things to people, I mean, they're really just a rogue agency from my experience with them. They're a federal agency, which means they don't really have any jurisdiction. If it's a federal agency, their jurisdiction is Washington, D.C. You can give all the cease and desist orders you want inside of Washington, D.C., but outside of that, you got to play in federal process. Just demand free people go here, do this, and do that. So he went past the deadline, and there was, I stood there. Again, the fight for freedom never sleeps. So I drove a good long ways to get to Oregon, stood there with a bunch of other people that fight for freedom, and basically said, no, thank you. And when the gentleman there that at the Sugar Pine Mine did get due process with the court, they basically gave the BLM a stand down order. So it's funny because even when I was at the Medford, Oregon BLM, and I was joking around with some people, and I was only halfway joking. I said, why don't we just give them their exact same paperwork, only change the names? Go to the Medford BLM office and tell them cease and desist. You got till this deadline to move all your stuff out of here, and then we're going to burn your building down. It just doesn't work like that. But why don't we switch it around on them? Hey, we're the people. We're out here in your parking lot, and you have until this date to move all your crud back to Washington, D.C. And, I don't know who believes they get jurisdiction from where, but I do know who the rulers of this country are. It says it right there in the Constitution, we the people.
Well, that is the interesting part of this, too, because this comes down on a lot of different subjects related to, do you actually have control over the property that you own or over the property you lease, etc., right? These things, they keep coming into play in all sorts of situations. And somehow jurisdiction is asserted from these federal authorities constantly. I mean, I never could quite understand that. I mean, am I just too simple to understand why it is they attempt to do this, or by what justification they have?
It's not even federal agencies. It's even here in Washington State. There was Predators of the Heart in Anacortes, Washington. Dave Colburn runs a sort of sanctuary there, and for 14 years he's had wildlife, cougars, wolf hybrids, bobcat, owls, a wildlife sanctuary, but he does shows. He does shows at libraries and schools and churches, community shows at fairs, and he has, I don't know, if it's 10 acres or 20 acres out there in Anacortes, and basically the county commissioners, which is 3 people, decided last year that they would write a new law that says what Dave does is illegal. It only affects Dave and the county because he's the only one doing it, and they just sent him a letter saying, hey, by the way, you're now illegal. You have until this date to move all your animals somewhere else and do something different.
Literally,
well, if he's got,
literally writing a law that only pertains to one person.
Right. It pertains to other people, but it only applies to him. It's kind of like if I woke up one morning and got together with 2 other people and said, hey, by the way, we made blue shirts illegal, and I just handed around to everybody that wore a blue shirt, here you go, here's the fine you have to pay unless you burn all your blue shirts. It's arbitrariness. There's no precedence to it. They've just decided that, and they even said when you watched, because they had a video of the commissioners talking about it, and they basically said, well, we don't know very much about these animals, and we just think it's safer if we do this, so yeah, that's it. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. Well, who gave you the jurisdiction over my life, liberty, and property?
But there wasn't some sort of a public safety issue that had come up? Like, I mean, I'm imagining stuff now, okay? I'm just imagining here, so I'm spitballing with you, but, I mean, if there was, say, a wildlife sanctuary that was nearby some sort of residential area and people had gotten injured by the wild animals who had, gone over into somebody else's area, this kind of thing, that isn't even the case, though, is it?
Well, you know what? You can't even tell because I went up to the county clerk's office and I filed a Freedom of Information Act request for the last 14 years. Every call, complaint, citation, visitation, arrest, anything that had anything to do with the property there in Anacortes. Okay. And the clerk said, well, you'll have to go talk to the sheriff. So the next day, as I was up there, on my off time, which is right before they close, went to the sheriff's office, and the sheriff said, well, this is a lot of information. We're going to need more time. I'm like, well, do you even have any? Well, I think there's an open investigation into something of this nature. And they said they can't answer until August 1st. And that was, a month ago. So you would think if there was these complaints and these issues that you're talking about, producing some kind of information wouldn't be that difficult.
Well, right.
I think it's all smoke and mirrors, and it's not really an issue at all. When you talk to Dave, which is one-sided, I mean, I get where you're coming from. He's got one side, and somewhere else there's another side. And but I can't get any of that information. The county hasn't been forthright with it. They're just continuing. They're going to charge him and his wife $2,000 apiece for every animal that's on the property.
Yeah, but Jason, you'd figure if this was a nuisance kind of thing, right? Let's just say, I mean, for the sake of argument, there was a nuisance being created by the practices on a particular piece of land which was adjacent to other citizens, right? I mean, it would make sense, but the problem
if it becomes a public nuisance, basically the nuisance is his neighbor doesn't like it. That's the nuisance.
Well, that's not something that you enforce the law based on, okay?
Right.
Unless you are intruding upon your neighbor. I mean, look, in the case of,
I even spent a few days on the property. There's some security in place there, and I spent a few days on the property, and thinking maybe wolves howl. Well, the only thing I could hear was one neighbor's tractor and the other neighbor's lawnmower. Now the wolves did howl, but the howling of wolves was quieter than both of those things. And it lasted about 3 minutes. The tractor went on for hours.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it was because I was thinking maybe noise issue, right? Let me stay up here for a while and see if there's a noise issue.
Well, that's where I was going to go. That's where I was going to go here. Is that, say, if you had a more densely populated area, right, and you got one neighbor causing another neighbor issues because they're being intrusive to them with noise, let's just say, right? The idea is you could pretty much do on your property, or at least it's the way I used to understand it. You could do whatever you needed to on your property so long as you didn't kind of invade adjacent properties, right? I mean, noise would be one of those things, but again, you got neighbors. We're so far past that from freedom in this country because now if you keep 3 unregistered cars on your property, those cars are a nuisance, right? If your grass is more than 5 inches tall, now that's a nuisance. Oh yeah, well that's
to your neighbors.
That's the point I was getting to. Is now it becomes, but see, there's a difference between something you're doing on your property and it encroaching on somebody else, right? That would be almost reasonable, right? I mean, that would kind of be like, well, you'd almost want local law enforcement, the sheriff, somebody to say, listen, you're causing a problem because of this thing which is coming off of your property onto other people's property. You would think, right?
Well, they do it with chickens. I mean, there's a lot of jurisdictions in this country now that, I know in Georgia they had a group that was called backyard chickens. Why? Because in a lot of jurisdictions they've made chickens in your backyard completely illegal. You're not even allowed to have chickens on your property. You live inside of this jurisdiction, which means you're not allowed to have chickens. Well, chickens are a food source. They make eggs every day. And so how many does one person need? Well, I don't know, but it seems to me 5 chickens, even on an acre of property, is not that big of a deal. But a jurisdiction can now say, sorry, you live in this jurisdiction, so you're not allowed to have chickens.
See, I could almost see that if you're on smaller plots of land that don't have, space in between the homes, because chickens require a rooster, right? And a rooster crowing in the early morning hours could be.
They only require a rooster to make more chickens, not to make eggs.
I know that, but I'm just I got that part, Jason. I'm not saying you need a rooster to make eggs. I'm not, the guy who goes, well, if a rooster lays an egg and it rolls down a roof. No, not doing that. I'm saying that if you had something that was intruding into other people's lives, into their space, then it starts to make sense. But the fact that they're not having the chickens there, this was the point I was going to make. If it's just chickens, those things don't make noise. They don't bother anybody. I mean, the rule could be keep them penned up. The rule could be keep them on your property. But to absolutely ban them seems ridiculous.
Well, the rules get more and more. The more people, the way I look at it is, in America now, basically the first one that gets offended wins. So if you and your neighbor are having an issue, just make sure you're the first one offended, because then you win.
Yeah, that seems to be it. The first complaint gets the win.
Let's suppose I keep a Bible in my house, and that Bible is now, as much of a nuisance as the chickens are. Why? Because my neighbor, he doesn't like it. Right?
Yeah,
Whoops.
right.
Now, or blue shirts. Where does it, I don't know where it starts or where it ends. See, it used to be, the hard part for me is it all boils down to community. It used to be you lived in a community of neighbors that were a community. Nowadays, your community's inside your walls or stretched out across Facebook or whatever. You don't really give two hoots about your neighbor if he's trying to have a living, and you don't have to get along with your neighbor because you got police and jurisdictions and all that stuff, and they'll force him to do or not do whatever you want him to do or whatever you don't like him to do. So if your grass is more than 3 inches tall, well, heck, you just call the county and they go enforce this arbitrary rule that says nobody in our jurisdiction can grow their grass more than 3 inches tall. And so you have a fine now because you didn't cut your grass. Or you have a fine because you have 2 cars. Or you have a fine because you have a chicken.
See, it sounds to me like you and I are in complete agreement about the fact that people have forgotten about personal responsibility. That's been thrown out the window, because as being a personally responsible member of a community, if you had a problem with your neighbor, there used to be a time when you knew who it was, you went and talked to him, and you handled it, because it was like, look, this is unreasonable because it's coming over my way, or, your stuff is leaking onto my grass, or, or your dog keeps getting loose, you need to get a better chain, something like that. These kind of things would be handled by people, but nowadays, they've been sort of conditioned to call in law enforcement, which, best of my estimation, never makes anything any better.
No, it's now that that's the whole thing about the rules. The more rules you make, the more, basically in America too, everything is illegal. I really, it's almost like everything is illegal. If the cops are coming, they'll find a reason to arrest you. If they need one, they'll find one because everything's illegal.
Well, that's the thing, is because when it comes down to it, realistically, okay. Again, let's take this down to the common everyday man. You or I are probably not fully aware of every single law that is in effect given a particular place where we stand. Right? There are probably 10,000 laws in this little town that I live in that I don't even have any awareness of, that I'm probably completely ignorant of, and they pass them all the time without giving notice or without making sure that people understand what's happening.
Yeah, you'll wake up one morning wearing a blue shirt and you'll get a fine because some arbitrary somebody somewhere voted that blue shirts are not illegal and you didn't know, and there you go. You will pay.
Right.
Or die. You will pay or die, usually.
Pay or you wind up getting, your property seized, your door kicked in, something. And this extends not only to just like personal stuff in a neighborhood, but I mean, even people running businesses are not necessarily aware of every single law. I've seen it before with my own eyes. Businesses that, you know, end up having a law enforcement person come in and tell them that they're selling a product which has been now banned in their area. And they were completely aware of the fact that they were now selling something which has been rendered illegal based on some law that passed, you know, 2 weeks ago. This was made particularly illegal, and it's not just stuff like, you know, the K2 or whatever, the synthetic marijuana or all that kind of stuff. I mean, all sorts of products. Even in a retail establishment, you might be unaware that you have these things on your shelf that have been outlawed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and even doing business in a particular way. There are individuals who make their living in certain areas, certain residential areas, by, say, gathering up scrap metal. You know, the old days when you used to know people that would gather up, you know, aluminum cans. Well, there's also these guys in a lot of parts of this country that'll go around collecting up scrap metal. Okay, and I know this sounds like a very small and stupid little issue, but they
made a lot of laws that jurisdict scrap metal now.
That's it. There is a lot of laws that make that completely illegal, to go around and pick up stuff which is likely causing a nuisance if it's left out on the street or whatever else. I mean, jagged, broken metal to be recycled and discarded things that have been laid out on the curb that the garbage man won't pick up. You would think that that's almost a service that they're doing, and also serving the the community in a way by getting rid of this stuff, which, you know, could end up just laying there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason or other, in a lot of municipalities, that has literally been outlawed. Like, you can be fined or even in some cases arrested. And I'm not saying it's a felony, but even so, it becomes like a nuisance legal charge against you. And you might not be aware, you might be aware, either way, but it seems like counterintuitive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's completely void of most stuff is completely void of common sense anymore. It's not common law or natural law or even common sense. It's just arbitrary ridiculousness. I mean, my favorite charge is obstruction. Because basically obstruction means I have no idea what to arrest you for, but obstruction will work. And I've made jokes with people. I said, listen, if an officer is standing out drinking coffee and you ask him for directions, you could be arrested for obstruction. Because at that particular moment in time, his job is to drink the coffee, and you're obstructing him from it.
Well, you know what
That's how arbitrary obstruction is.
But you know what other charge? I'll tell you, I have a different favorite charge, and that is resisting arrest. Because I've seen everything else from somebody's court case dismissed, okay, with the exception of resisting arrest. Now, you would think that if there was no reason for them to arrest you because the other charges, let's just say, okay, we'll again take another imaginary scenario real quick. Let's just say you were trespassing on a particular piece of property according to what an officer thought they observed. And it turned out to be incorrect, that you were not trespassing, and you bring documentation to court to show that you were not trespassing. And therefore, the trespassing charge is dismissed because it is no longer valid, right? So you're with me so far.
Yep.
But if you have a resisting arrest charge on there, the idea that you wouldn't have been being placed under arrest had the officer been aware that you weren't breaking the law to begin with, they don't void the resisting arrest charge. What is that?
Nope.
You know, that's one of those things where I've seen it over and over again, where it's like, they were arrested for these 4 charges. Everything else was dropped, but the resisting arrest charge still stood. And we're not even talking about people that are directly, really, truly resisting, like in a physical sense, but they may just protest verbally that they don't wish to be taken into custody. Okay. They may not entirely cooperate. They may just lay down on the ground and make the officer pick them up. This kind of thing. Okay, and that's completely well within your right, as far as I understand. Once they take you into custody, you can just kind of sit there. Okay?
then it's their problem. They've taken you into custody, so I don't know. Maybe I'm out of my mind, but I always understood that to be one of those things you could do when you were being arrested. But
well, there's Supreme Court rulings about what you can do if you're being illegally arrested. I mean, there's some real teeth to the law about being illegally arrested. Nobody's using it because it's pretty violent. But if no thank you worked, I don't know where the country goes. I mean, the country itself is like searching for its soul. It doesn't. It's so far past what it was designed to be. It doesn't know what it is anymore. I mean, really, if you look at the country as a whole and the things that have gone on in the last, year or 2 years, at least as far as I ever understood America to be, we don't know what we're doing anymore. We're trying to decide if we're going to be a socialist nation, or which we never were designed to be. We weren't supposed to be a democracy, but it's sort of what we are now, or even an oligarchy. But we're like searching for our soul. The country as a whole is in this turmoil and uproar where you have just where, like you said, everything's illegal. How did we get here? How do we get back? Well, I mean, the good news is I think that it's going to. I think we'll find our soul. I think the next generation already looks at it and goes, "This is really stupid."
Well, yeah, I am seeing that too. The national identity crisis is going to be challenged by the generation which is upcoming. I do see that. I worry about it a bit because they're so disconnected in a lot of ways. And we're not still addressing the whole problem of community. That has not been addressed, and I think, and it sounds like, I'm an old man, in the old days, this is the way to, I understand, but, and one of the things that is repeated in a lot of your presentations is this concept of no thank you. I wonder if you would like to speak to that a little bit and explain to people why it is that phrase comes out of your mouth so often. And
well, it was interesting because having gone through the Bundy Ranch, and the media spun that wildly out of control, but on the ground, the people on the side that would be called the resistance were fairly calm and relaxed. And they were basically saying, hey, no thank you, you can't do this. Because you have a guy who's been out there, his family's been farming for generations, farming cattle for generations. The federal government starts putting some arbitrary fees that they have no jurisdiction to put on. He's willing to pay those fees to the county, and then you have this federal force coming to steal all his livestock. Well, but it's all supposedly civil, and those guys are the good guys. Well, at the end of the day, you basically had a group of people there saying, no thank you. And once I say no thank you to whatever you're trying to do, what are you going to do after that? Because when you got a group, when that force of the federal government came down and met another force, right? Because it was firearms and it was a standoff and all that stuff. One side was just saying, hey, you know what? No, thank you. You go back to what you were doing and we'll go back to what we're doing, and everyone's okay. So the resistance was basically simply, no, thank you, go away. So for me, I try to boil things down to the simplest it is. When you're dealing with whatever. Every time I go now, at Sugar Pine, what was Sugar Pine Mine? It was basically a group of people saying, hey, you know what? No thank you. You go back to what you were doing, not harming anyone, and we'll go back to what we were doing, not harming anyone, and we'll all get along. Up there in Anacortes, they're gonna come confiscate all of his animals and maybe kill some and charge him and what are you going to say? Well, you're going to say, you know what, no thank you. I'm going to go back to not harming anybody over here. And you go, so I guess at the end of the day, what my form of resistance is whenever I'm dealing with government on some arbitrary garbage, no thank you is the answer. And it also was birthed, too, about, I realized whenever I go to redress grievances with the government, right? I go to a city council or, I've gone to city council meetings and talked about stuff. Well, you want to know what they basically do? They basically ignore you. The government's play is to ignore you, right? Ignore you and you'll go away. We can do whatever we want, and if we ignore you, you will go away. Why? Because, we don't have a police force where we go in, slam them on the ground, put handcuffs on them, arrest them and throw them in jail for being idiots, right? We, for some reason, we don't have that authority as we, the people, like we should. So in reverse, I can't say, you know what, the government is being really dumb, and I don't like anything they're saying. I'm just going to ignore them, because at that point, it turns into terrorism. At the end of the day, to me, a lot of this is basically terrorism. We've decided blue shirts are illegal. We're going to write you a ticket. If you don't pay the ticket, we're going to come kidnap you. If you don't want to be kidnapped, then we will kill you. That's what government is. So I don't want hostilities to rise. I want it to be the easiest thing, and I just want to say, you know what? No, thank you. I haven't harmed anyone, so I'm going to go back to what I was doing, and you go back to what you're doing. I think that's what resistance looks like. And I think if we, the people, would consistently just say that to whoever you're dealing with, no thank you, I'm going to go back to what I was doing, not harm anyone. You go back to what you were doing, not harm anyone. They'll still drag you into court. And I think in court you say no thank you. And I think if we, on a mass, anybody who's not harming another individual just said no thank you. You went into court and said no thank you. When they said, here, pay this, well, you're found guilty and you're going to pay this fine, and you said no thank you. And we let's keep it as civil as possible. Here's the new revolution. No thank you is the revolution. You want a non-violent revolution in this country? Good. If you're not harming anyone, say no thank you to government. You across the board. No thank you. Do you have a fishing license? No thank you. I'm not harming anyone. Did you, I don't know how far you can stretch it. I don't know if you saw that guy from Montana, but that's basically what he's saying. I'm foraging for food. I don't have a fishing license because I'm going to catch a fish and I'm going to eat it.
And that is kind of amazing that you can boil it down to just that simple a concept. But it's true. I mean, really, if you don't contract with a lot of this stuff, then you're not participating in it. You're not part of it. It's that simple, kind of. I mean...
Yeah, it's like if America would wake up and realize that you do not have to do millions of the things that government forces you to do every day. You don't have to do that. You can say no thank you. And you get 350 million people saying no thank you. No thank you.
Then that's it. I mean, the system collapses in and of itself because it can't sustain itself without cooperation. It just can't.
Right.
I mean, that's what the strategic reality is. If there was a significant number in the population that just refused to participate, not violent revolution, not an uprising, nothing like that, but simply said no and wasn't doing harm to others. I'm not talking about, somebody who's who's been murdered or whatever being taken in by the state, etc., this kind of thing. I'm talking about if you're not harming anybody, like you said, if you're not harming anybody, you're not intruding on anyone else, and you're just sticking to, what you're doing, and you're just living your life and simply not participating. If there was enough of them, the whole system would come to a screeching halt.
Yeah, I mean, eventually you're going to have, the government's too big. Eventually you'll have to say, no, thank you. They're in every aspect of your life. If you don't want them there, you need to say, no, thank you. But it's fear-based, right? It's fear-based. I can't say no, thank you, because they'll harm me.
Well, that's what it is. The consequence is held over your head.
I'll lose my stuff.
I'll lose my stuff, I'll lose my money, I'll lose my job, I'll lose my freedom, I'll lose my life. You know, you're going to lose something. That's what it is, that something will be taken from you unless you cooperate. And I don't know about you, but that sounds a hell of a lot like what, you know, organized crime guys do, basically, is say, well, look, you can either pay us or we can burn your place down.
That's basically what the government is. It's organized crime, and you will pay us for your protection, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. Is, you know, pay me or, you know, give me or, and that's all it is. I'm being asked via Skype for you to, because I get Skype questions sometimes.
Okay.
I'm being asked for you to explain how you got involved in the Bundy Ranch, because we only briefly touched upon that. But how is it that you got alerted that was all going on out there, and how did you come to find yourself literally there?
Well, YouTube's a beautiful thing. I think for me it was a combination of history, Waco, Texas, and Ruby Ridge, and I didn't really like either one of those. I thought that was completely nothing close to justice, and not even allowed in this country to do those kinds of things. And I just kind of told myself that's never going to happen again if I have anything to do about it. You know, if the government's going to surround somebody with, you know, snipers and rifles and whatever, well, then surround the government. And I kind of just said that's never going to happen again if I have anything to do about it. I know a lot of other people that felt the same way. So when you know, somebody told me something about the Bundy Ranch, so I got alerted from a friend who watches, you know, the net and whatever. You know, I'm sort of involved in 3% groups and whatnot, but I was working. I mean, I was on a roof in Georgia, and somebody says, "Hey, have you heard of the Bundy Ranch in Nevada?" I'm like, "No." They said, "You should look into it." And I said, "All right, well, send me a couple of links." And I watched a video of, you know, basically they were letting the government do what they wanted to do, but Ammon and his family were trying to look in the back of some dump trucks that were coming off the mesa. And he said, I want to look in that truck. And they said, "You can't look in that truck." "I want to look in that truck." And I think they were trying to find out whether the government had killed cattle and was hauling them off, because they weren't allowed to do that. Well, they weren't going to let them look in the truck, and they ended up tasing Ammon and tasing I think there's a 57-year-old woman with cancer. Just tased, you know, she just happened to be there and said, "No, you can't do that to Ammon." And then she got tased, and they had dogs. It looked like Germany. There was 2 German shepherds and a bunch of big, abusive people saying, "You can't look in the truck." It's our truck, number one. I paid for that frickin' truck. Right? It's tax money you're using. So those people want to look in the truck. So when I saw that happen, I was like, okay, this is a tinderbox. Right? This is one of those things that I said I wasn't ever going to allow happen. So I just called a couple of buddies and said, "Hey, listen, I'm leaving for Nevada," and we hopped in. I didn't know what I was going to find when I got there. And there was all kinds of propaganda while we were driving. You know, people were saying, "Well, they're going to shut down the highway from anybody coming." And I'm like, it's in it. You know, Las Vegas is there. You can't stop every car on the highway. And then when I got there, you know, I guess the hostilities had died down, but there was still sort of this tension in the air. But I looked around, and you know, I got there in the middle of the night, and I estimated there to be about 400 people. And I'm like, "Hey, we win. If there's 400 people here that are all willing to say no thank you to this violence and whatever, this is done." And that was before the standoff. It was before Cliven's speech and whatever.
So this
was a community of people that stood up and said no.
Right, and this is that video you're talking about with the where the leads, where somebody broke the leads off of Ammon, right?
Yep.
That was that one that circulated around that time. And meanwhile, they thought that maybe they were taking away one of the cattle in the trucks, right? That was what the thought was, and they just wanted to be sure that they didn't have it.
Yeah, all the videos that I could see was basically them just trying to document. You know, you had cowboys riding around and saying, "Here's the trucks that have come into town, and here they all are parked, and We don't know what they're doing, and they were just basically documenting it.
Mm.
We want to document everything that's going on. They weren't really necessarily getting in the way, and they weren't like making, you know what I'm saying? They were even being respectful to the authorities, saying, all right, you think you're here and you're doing your job. We're just going to show that everybody who's here and what they're exactly doing.
And
escalated,
not impeding any of what it was they were doing, but actually just trying to document it. And that's where that incident came from. And yeah, then I do remember that lady was supposed to be sick. I didn't remember she had cancer, but I remember there was like this sick lady who was pretty small also that was there with Amon that had that happen to her. And that was actually before Cliven made the big speech though that got carried to her.
Yep, that was probably about a week before.
Really? Okay.
Because I think that the contractor cowboys that were working with the BLM had got there probably a week or a week and a half before I'd even gone. So this thing had been sort of building. Cliven had it building for years because he just said, listen, you don't have the right to do that. It's public. The thing about it is it's weird. It's public land. It's out there in the middle of Nevada, and they use it for recreation and whatever. But he says, listen, it's beneficial use. It benefits the environment. I mean, you can go down there and spend a week with Clive, and he can explain to you how the cattle is good for you. He can show you where the cattle graze, the grass is green. Where the cattle don't graze, the grass is all burned out because there's a fence that the city has that kind of takes the wild from the city. Well, on one side of the fence where the cows graze, it's all green. On the other side, it's all brown and gross.
Which
but
shows
the cattle, but the cattle have to be able to travel from the river valley up into the mountains. They get certain nutrients down in the river, and they get certain nutrients up in the mountains. And so they have to be able to range that far. And so if it's beneficial use, I mean, it gets really weird. If it's public lands and beneficial use, whose jurisdiction? Whose land is it?
Well, right. And again, this is not a matter of causing harm. And people criticize and say, well, the mistake that he made was actually starting to pay the fines and all this kind of thing. But realistically, if you started paying a fine in good faith and then discovered, as you're making payments on it, that somehow or other that fine was invalid,
Well, all the other ranchers that are no longer there because they got run out of business paid the fines. Well, accepted the federal government's jurisdictions, and then the federal government jurisdictioned them out of business.
It just kind of priced them out of existence because it became too costly to pay for that stuff, as I understood it.
Well, they also limited the number of cattle you could run. Oh. Once you accepted their jurisdiction, well, then they can make rules, right? At one point, there had to be thousands of cattle ranging there. There was 52 ranchers. Now there's one. Okay, so 52 ranchers used to be able to run 150 head of cattle for every water right that was there. Now there's one rancher. And it gets ridiculous. When you try to make sense of the arbitrariness of it, if you're just one of those people that accept, well, the government said so, But if you start boiling it down and looking at it, wait a minute, this used to have hundreds and thousands of cattle roaming in and out of here. Now there's one guy, and even he's too much.
Yeah, that's really bizarre too. Is that if it's been done for so long, and nobody can prove any sort of detrimental result from it. I mean, I know there was also that talk about some turtle or something at the time.
The desert tortoise.
Right, the desert tortoise. That's it, right. Okay, and there's probably a difference between a turtle and a tortoise. Don't message me, please. I'm very sure that I'm totally describing the animal we're talking about incorrectly. But the idea is that there was some sort of desert animal that was there that reminded me of a turtle that was supposed to be, the reason why the cattle couldn't go there. Okay, I remember that being one of the justifications. So that's all I'm saying. Please don't hit me on the details, guys. Okay.
But the turtles thrive on the water rights that Cliven maintains so his cattle can drink. I mean, it's been, like I said, beneficial use. The land benefits from Cliven being there because he brings water up there for his cattle, and all the rest of the land benefits from the water.
Right, including the wildlife.
Including the wildlife.
Yeah, so...
Right, the land is better off because Cliven is there.
Yeah, which, again, like you said, it's kind of impossible to sort out, all of the contradictory crap when it comes to these. I'm wondering how this started, and why it is the Bureau of Land Management is involved with all these different things. I mean, it seems really strange a jump to go from talking about mining in Oregon to talking about cattle in Nevada, but it's really based on the same principle. I think it's kind of irrelevant what the case is. It's just a matter of asserting jurisdiction over people and creating laws that generate revenue, etc. That's what it seems to me. I mean, I don't know. Again, maybe I'm crazy, but that seems to be the point of all this.
Well, I liken it if it's the Bureau of Land Management, right? And they're supposed to manage the public lands.
Right.
Let's suppose I have a house in your neck of the woods, and I'm going to hire you to manage it for me, right? Okay, you're going to manage that property of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I come down there and say, well, you can't go in there. Why not? Well, there's this delicate flower that grows inside your house, and you'll damage it. But it's mine. No. You'll damage this flower. But wait, hold on. It's my property. Yeah, but I manage it for you, and you can't go in there. That's how arbitrary the BLM has sort of gotten, in my opinion. We manage it for you, and you can't touch it. Why?
That's bizarre, yeah. No, that's really truly strange because if you do break it. See, I love the way you keep doing this though. You keep breaking it down to the most simple, the most simple idea, so that people can understand this. You're right, because here's what happens: the Bureau of Land Management is allegedly hired by the boss of the government, which should be the people. So the people, essentially, by extension, have hired the Bureau of Land Management to manage land. Now they come back and, in a rather interesting turn of events, come around and start telling you what it is you can and cannot do with this land based on their land management, right?
Right.
So, okay.
It's arbitrary.
And then it's completely arbitrary because I'm told that there's situations that, where there's actually people that are participating in slightly harmful things to the environment or problematic things to the environment, and they don't get bothered for some reason. I'm imagining it's because they paid their fines and things, I guess.
Well, that's the interesting part, too, about that thing in Mesquite. If you'll read now, in Mesquite, the Bureau of Land Management has parceled off a couple of different parcels, 146,000 acres and 86,000 acres somewhere else, and I haven't seen it on a map, so I don't know what it is, but they're opening it to some drilling prospecting. Right there up near in Cliven's. Mesquite is where, 3 miles to Mesquite from Cliven's. And there's now, over 200,000 acres that the BLM is like, okay, we're going to have these. You can have 30 days to come talk to us about why you think we should or shouldn't have these guys drilling up here in this environment. Well, wait a minute. You thought cattle was harsh on the environment. What if you bring in a bunch of drillers in?
Yeah, drilling's okay, fracking's okay.
But cows, you can't make this stuff up, dude.
No, that's the truth. I mean, all that stuff that's, sanctioned because it's part of a greater corporate mechanism, that stuff is just fine, no matter how much damage it does, no matter how many, intrusive smells it creates in a community, no matter how much damage and literally like earth-shaking results come from it. That's all fine and dandy. But man, you bring some cows to the wrong patch of grass.
Yeah,
and
we're gonna sell some really expensive permits to some drilling folks,
right?
On your behalf. You'll never see any of the money really because it'll go into the budget where we spend it on. There's a whole other topic.
Right.
How much the government spends and what they spend it on. But they're managing our land so that they can do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. No, completely.
Yeah, something's wrong.
Something. See, but that's why I'm going through this with you, because I'm saying to myself, I mean, look, maybe I just don't understand this, but it seems like there's a lot of logical fallacies built in here. And at the end of the day, though, it all comes down to, if we don't participate on a massive enough scale, this kind of stuff doesn't run. It doesn't have the ability to justify itself through revenue generation and through asset seizure. I mean, It's just that simple, isn't it? Or again, am I just oversimplifying things?
No, I mean, I don't know. They sell timber permits, all government permits, and then the money goes to the government for them to spend on more government. I mean, I don't even know. The disappointing thing for me is, now that I look at the land management the way that I do, when I am out in the environment, the one thing that bothers me the most is, I think people should be able to enjoy the lands, but when you go out into the land and there's some desolate place right off the beaten trail, and you know what you find? You find beer cans.
Mm.
And I'm like, wait a minute now. We wouldn't need land managers if we, the people, would manage the land. Beneficial use, and leaving beer cans in the environment and trash and whatnot. Forest fire, I don't even know. I don't want to make those things illegal. There's that personal responsibility, right? With a little personal responsibility, we don't need land managers. We don't need an arbitrary animal telling us where we can go and what we can do.
Right. So the whole concept becomes extremely wasteful because people have just refused to acknowledge their own personal responsibility regarding all this. Listen, Jason, we're running low on time. Believe it or not, we killed a whole hour here. Just just bouncing back and forth between these topics. Actually, I might want to, if you got time on Thursday, I've got open time on Thursday. I'm going to try and get in touch with you and see if you want to go in depth about a couple of these situations, especially the Bundy Ranch thing, because now I'm getting more questions and we don't even have time. But what I do want to do is give you a chance to tell people where they can find out about the Fight for Liberty Never Sleeps. And
it's the Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps. It's on Facebook. There's a YouTube channel, The Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps, and all the every video we took out there is on there, and some of them are long. I was trying to cover everything. Then the interesting part is the CNN stole my video to call Cliven Bundy a racist.
Wait a minute.
They really did.
You mean that video where he's standing up on the stage and all that?
That's why I took that video.
I did not know that.
I took that video. It was on my Bamboozer. I was just covering everything live, right? Some people can't be here and see what's happening, so I'm going to document every bit of it. So he gave an hour-and-a-half long speech. They pulled out 10 seconds and made him a racist.
Wow. I did not know that video originated with you.
Yeah, the video they played on CNN was my video.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't get paid for any of that now. They just took it, right? I didn't have a video manager. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, you didn't exactly have a representative agent to shop your video for you. It just kind of got took because you were putting it out there for the people. But you know what? On the bright side, people did get to see for themselves some things, and I think that whole racist angle kind of backfired on the mainstream media anyway. Regarding
good man down, I guess. So
there you go. So, but yeah, so the YouTube channel goes under the same name, The Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps.
I think it's an acronym. TFFNS.
Ah, okay. Cool, and it's also on Facebook. You got a Twitter account for that thing too, or what?
You know what? I don't really know. I had some people help me with it, so there might be a Twitter out there. I don't know if it has the same name. But if I'm taking a video, it usually live uploads at the Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps. It's been a little slow now because of the tyranny, for me personally, but I eat, sleep, and drink it. And like I said, the Fight for Freedom never sleeps, and so if you're not resisting somewhere, you should be. And your freedoms are yours. I mean, here, Ammon said this, you have rights. but you only have them if you first claim them, 2, you beneficially use them,